the 96th episode of the Campus Comics Cast. This is Dan Brown, and I'm joined this time by
Scott Reed
and Mike Atchison.
And just, so everybody knows ahead of time, just in case we run into any technical difficulties along the way, we are still recording remotely. We used to record this all back in the store, if you can imagine, if we can even remember that anymore. It's been quite a while now. But we're all socially distancing, from miles and miles away. But yeah, just heads up in case there's any audio issues or any technical glitches along the way. And again, just want to remind everybody you get what you pay for. But the store is open, and if you want to come in, we are at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale, Illinois. And we're open every Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5. And if you want to call before you come over, the number is 618-457-6011. And again, we are always on Facebook and Twitter too, if you want to look us up there. And, if, we have had some people want to do curbside still and stuff like that. So, feel free to call ahead. We can accommodate you that way too. That's not a problem. And of course, inside we're still masking up and trying to maintain social distance just like everybody else is. So please keep that in mind when you come in. And we got a lot of comic talk tonight on this time. Just a lot of different books to kind of talk about.
Before we jump into that,
okay,
let's just remind everybody that Campus Comics is taking submissions to send into CGC.
Right.
So if you've got any books that you're wanting to send in to get graded, and just consider dropping them off at Campus Comics. And we're usually holding books till there's about 10 to 20 to ship in, just to kind of defray the cost of shipping for everybody. But if you are in a rush, you can also say, hey, I'll pay the full cost of shipping and just get them shipped, and we'll get them shipped out right away. So, and I say we because that is something that I'm helping Mike with, is getting those shipments going. So,
right. Yeah, and again, that is nice too. Let everybody just kind of chip in on shipping like that, so it's not as bad for everybody.
Yep.
So definitely something to take advantage of with that. So the first thing we wanted to talk about this time was a book called Abbott. And Scott, this is one you mentioned, you brought up.
Yeah, just for a couple of reasons. One, because there's actually a new series out right now that's a follow-up to this one, Abbott 73, that's on the shelves. And of course, there's this has been at least optioned for a TV series. So there, if you want to know what it's all about before it makes it to the small screen, then this would be a good chance to pick it up and read it, so you can kind of be in the know before you actually see it someplace else.
So this is, let's see, written by Saladin Ahmed, illustrated by Sami Kivala, and it's colored by Jason Wordy. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing all those right. I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, so just a pretty good book. Again, I'd heard of this, but I never really picked it up before we, read it for here. But yeah, it was an interesting story of a, female black journalist in the early 70s.
Were you familiar with any of these creators prior to this book?
The writer's name sounds familiar, but I can't remember what I know him from.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I just can't remember if I just remember that name from reading this previously, or if that is.
He was the he wrote Black Bolt, and I think he got nominated for a Hugo Award for his writing on that series.
Throne of the Crescent Moon. Huh. Okay, is what he was the award for best novel, and so that was the Hugo Award was for Throne of the Crescent Moon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's see if it says. I'm just where all information is gone to Wikipedia, but yeah, he did 12 issues of Black Bolt for Marvel back in 2017, 2018. Oh, he wrote Exiles. I wonder if that's the issue that has the Peggy Carter as Captain America.
I bet it is.
Yeah, Quicksilver, some Spider-Man, some Magnificent Ms. Marvel.
A lot of Marvel stuff.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, everything looks like everything he's done other than Abbott
Oh, okay.
is Marvel.
Well, that's probably where we've heard him.
Yeah.
Before.
I was looking to see if it was. I can't tell if this is the Exiles series that has the first Peggy Carter cap or not. So,
Okay.
so I got distracted. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm chasing that rabbit hole. Whenever
Right.
you get on Wikipedia, you
What
just
the internet does to you.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure to bring up the colors too, because I really like the colors in this book. I mean, it gets a little looser than normal for comic colors, but I think they bring in some really nice textures to it. Gives it a little bit more of a unique look to the book, and again, and that's not sloppy or anything like that. It's still pretty tight, but it adds a lot of texture. It brings a lot to the artwork, I feel like, and kind of raises it up a little bit. And again, people don't always think about it, but a colorist can really make or break a book.
For sure.
Their stamp is on every page and really kind of sets the mood for a lot of scenes. So, basically we have the story here of a black reporter in the early 70s, and, she starts coming across these really sort of horrific murder scenes. And so the first one is the horse, right?
Yes.
Where there's a stable and there's like just a horse head is left, like the rest of the horse is missing apparently.
And I guess it's important that it's a police horse.
Right.
Yeah.
But then like the next one is they just find like the legs from a human body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a horse head and the legs from the human body.
Right.
And I don't know about you guys, and I'm not like especially skilled in detective work, but I kind of knew, okay, we got partial bodies of animals and humans. There's something going to happen related to that.
Yeah, I was expecting something gruesome to be happening. I did not guess what was going to happen, though.
Yeah.
So
were you surprised by the supernatural element as opposed to it just being a crime story?
I was, and I still don't know how I feel about that. I would have just taken a straight up crime story.
Mm-hmm. Man, me and you both.
I feel like the reporter, first off, I feel like the reporter character has kind of been snagged by some pretty high level comic book characters. And so you don't see the reporter trope as much in comic books. I would like to kind of see that explored more, but you've got Clark Kent and Lois Lane and Peter Parker as very high profile comic book characters that sort of have that job, and so I feel like you have other comic characters try to probably stay away from that because of that, so not seem redundant, which is too bad because I think it works really well here in this story.
And it's also the time in which it's set. I mean, Detroit in 1972. I mean, that is, and her being a black woman and the things she's dealing with. And I'll go ahead, Dan. I don't mean to.
Yeah. No, but yeah, again with that, like I feel like that's compelling enough. Just the sort of institutionalism she's running up against throughout this story.
Yeah,
I would just been fine if it's a crazy serial killer or something. Now, again, the supernatural element does bring something else to it, and again, we find out, from these first two victims that what that is someone has made a centaur, who attacks her,
mm-hmm.
and. People, she tries to tell people what's going on and they kind of doubt her throughout the story for the most part. But it just feels like, I don't know, maybe if they'd played it a little more vague, but again, honestly, I'm not usually a fan of that either, so I shouldn't, complain about that, I guess.
Well, and a lot of their, I'm trying to come up with the right words to say here. It's almost like they just don't believe what it is that she's talking about. That they think it's the horse was killed by Black Panthers, and the second murder, actually the first person who was murdered, if there hadn't been a police presence there, that she had been tipped off about it early, that it probably would have just been swept under the rug.
Yeah, they said they were going to rule it as a suicide when there's half a body missing.
Half a body, yeah.
I mean, the first few scenes really sets the tone. And it's really what hooked me. She walks in and she's trying to get information from the police on the scene of this horse mutilation, and all the white middle-aged reporters are just looking at her like, they're trying to get the police. They're pretty much putting words in the in the mouth of the detective on the scene, so that they can say, yeah, it was the Black Panthers or some black militant organization or whatever. And then she comes in and questions it, and they're like, well, who are you? And she's already kind of made a name for herself by reporting on police brutality and exposing some of that. So even though it's set in the 70s, it does kind of resonate in the modern day.
Yeah, and not only is she a woman, she's a black woman, which you could still see news at this time being a boys' club. So
exactly, I think she was even referred to as Lois Lane in this story. Thought that was cool.
So there is some nice use of panels and the grid throughout this. More effective than a lot of comics do anymore too. But there's specifically a scene during the Centaur attack where she starts to drive away, and then we get a really nice kind of breakup of the panels as her car drives away, and just some sort of nice intercutting that the artist is doing here. There's another really good scene of this somewhere, and I can't remember where it is in the book. I'll bring it up if we run across it here.
Yeah, and this is this was a 6-issue series, right? Was it 6 or 5?
I feel like maybe I read the trade.
I did too. That's why I can't remember how many issues.
I feel like it's 5, but I'm not sure. 5 or 6-ish.
Yeah.
Man.
I was flipping through, and I just noticed that on the chapter pages for each book is where they're starting to draw that pentagram on the grid of the town.
Yeah.
That just shows you how clued in I am.
Well, I tell you what, that's kind of one of my issues with the book is she's this very intelligent reporter, but it really takes her a while to put together some of this stuff. Like she does, like the Centaur attack. It's quite a while before she realizes, oh yeah, there was a horse and a guy cut up. To me, that would have been the first thing I thought, and it was the first thing I thought when I was reading this. And there was
what happens when you put together a horse and a man?
Yeah, but there was another example of that too in here, and I can't remember what it was, but it was really like, I don't know if it was just, the whole thing with the flash on her camera. So kind of jumping ahead though, like there seems to be like some prophecy around her though too, where I think it's they're calling her the Lightbringer. So basically, she can dispel these creatures with a shot from her camera. Basically.
Well, it's any light source. It doesn't have to be from her camera.
Right, but that's how she kind of discovers it over the story.
Yeah.
Or her phone, and it's got to be pretty bright light apparently, because just normal ambient light's not going to dispel the shadow creatures.
Yeah, she uses the brights in the car, and she uses the camera. Right.
But there's a scene towards the end where she's running through the maze from the Minotaur and gets pretty far along before she hits him with the camera.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, that would have been the first thing I did when I saw that thing. Like, why even run? Just hit it with the camera and then you're done. But again, they would lose a couple pages that way story-wise. I don't know. And
they would lose that entire cool maze page where they have it, all the breakups, so.
I don't know about you guys, but if a Minotaur is chasing my butt, I don't think I would think about anything but trying to dive into the bushes. I don't think I could think straight. So, I mean,
I think you can make that case, but this is also like the third or fourth weird creature she's come across in this story, and she has basically defeated them all with bright lights. So I feel like at some point you're going to have to, your survival instinct's going to kick in, and you're going to be like, oh, hey, I need to brighten this thing up.
All right.
So I feel like that argument only holds so much water.
Like you said, Dan, I would have been good with this being just some basic run-of-the-mill serial killer mystery that she's working on. The one thing about the supernatural aspect was I really enjoyed that 800-year-old hippie stoner type. I forget his name again. He had his little tarot card mysticism shop. I kind of dug that character. But other than that,
just story-wise, I feel like you can hit all the same story beats.
Yes.
And you can still have an older, crazy guy with like a cult or something without the supernatural element. So it's just like, I don't know, other than just maybe wanting to appeal to that sort of sect of the culture, I don't really know what that adds to the story, really. And again, maybe that's a nitpicky thing.
The hippie's name is Sebastian.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just read here, Abbott is actually, its Hugo Award nomination or finalist status is due to, the story itself is up for a Hugo Award.
Okay, and again, that would be because of the supernatural elements that it would get a Hugo.
Oh, okay.
So, again, they wouldn't even be eligible for that if it were just a straight crime story. So maybe that's why he kind of did that stuff. And that, I don't know.
I guess that's because that's where his bread and butter is from his writing.
There's that too, I guess.
Yeah. So you go with what you know. So.
Right. But again, that's not to say don't read the story or anything. Yeah. It's still really good. I'm glad I read this.
Where do you rate it against our previous graphic novel we read, Velvet?
Velvet?
I don't know, man. Velvet's a pretty hard bar for me. I don't know.
I think Velvet's a lot better than this. I like this, but I love Velvet.
Yeah.
So to me, that's hands down. Velvet is several grade points higher than what Abbott is.
Yeah. I don't know. I think in my mind, I could read either one of them. I'll continue to read them. I wouldn't put them too far apart. I'd say it's not like right on the heels of Velvet, but it's only a couple points behind. I really enjoyed this story. I think I enjoyed the time, the era that it's set in.
Yeah.
Even though, which ironically, so's Velvet. That's
right
in the 70s, but it's also flashing back to the 50s, 60s, whatever.
And again, that's not to say this is a bad book. There are a lot of way worse comics out there than this, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
And
this is a good book.
Yeah.
It's and it's different. It's not your regular run of the mill book.
And having like the black female protagonist doesn't feel ham-fisted in here. It feels very natural. It feels, authentic to me, a white guy in 2021. But I would read more of this for sure.
The character is really, really good in this. I felt like all the characters are authentic. You can totally see. Okay, talk about the white guys in it. You got some white guys that despise her just because she's black, and then you got some white guys that are past that, and they're like the very first group that she runs into. There's one of them that helps her, and so it's just all the characters seem like they could have existed, but non-supernatural.
Right. Scott, is it true that the sequel you were talking about you said Abbott 1973?
Abbott, I can't remember if it's Abbott 73 or Abbott 1973. I'll look that up while you guys are talking.
Yeah, because this is 1972, right? That this is taking place, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is just like the next year, this new story that's out now.
And the sequel, is that where they introduce her new partner, Costello?
I haven't read the sequel yet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sleep well tonight, Mike. Sleep the sleep of the just with that.
It's Abbott 1973.
Yeah.
I'm docking your pay, Mike.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Second issue is out of that series.
Yeah, there's another good page in here too, just as far as the layout goes, where she's talking to her ex-husband, who's a police officer or the detective, and they're kind of going over the crimes, and the page is like photographs on the evidence, and like they're sort of in the sort of Polaroid photos. So I thought that was a really nice way to kind of convey the storytelling there, what they're going through.
Yeah, all in all, this is something I could keep reading. I'll definitely be reading the sequel.
Yeah. Do you think this is something that definitely reads better as a trade?
Well, that's how I read it, so it's hard to say because I didn't read the monthly, installments that it was coming out.
I think so, Scott, because it reads so quickly. I feel like I don't think there was any like super, the plot cliffhangers that really would make me want it to be in a serialized format. I think I'm good with this being one big story.
You know what, Mike, having said that, I'm probably going to agree with that because I feel like if again, this is just due to the amount that I read. I feel like I would have trouble remembering what happened last issue by the time I get to the next one. And again, that's not necessarily a fault of the book. It's just I read so much stuff, and I go through. I consume it so quickly. I bet
Right.
that, and this happens all the time. So I feel like that probably would happen to me on this if I was reading it monthly.
That really is. I mean, that's a problem for me anymore. I can't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's first world problems, of course, but
That's nerd world problems, is what that is. But yeah, we should all be so lucky to have that problem.
exactly.
Yeah. And so it's been optioned. Is there any talk about where it's going or casting or anything like that? Does anybody know?
I don't know, but let me do a little look up here and I'll see if I can find something. Did you read what was it called? I think it's like 1973, but it's like MX.
No, you talked about this on the podcast before, though. I think with some of the previews.
Yeah.
Episodes, but yeah, I never read that.
Okay. This is I read the first issue of that, and I wish, like I said, I can't. It's Roman numerals, so I can't remember exactly what the Roman numerals are. But it had a really strong first issue, and then it kind of petered out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I probably need to go back and revisit that story.
That's too bad because so many books have.
It had such a cool concept.
First issues, you know what I mean, and they pick up. But yeah, like I love a book with a really strong first issue.
Yeah, I mean, you have this taxi driver who's wielding the magical crowbar, and she's getting supported by the radio DJ about where she should be going to fight all these supernatural creatures, and it just didn't hit for me.
Really? Well, that's another one that sounds like that is made for a TV series or something. So.
Okay, so Abbott was optioned. This are in January. Abbott was optioned by Paramount Plus streaming service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there's no casting information or anything that I see.
Well, it sounds like they got a platform for it already then, so that's where it'll be.
That's the old CBS app, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's like next week. I think it switches over. It's coming up, like beginning of March. So yeah, if you've got CBS, All Access, that's what we're talking about. It's going to be switching over to the Paramount Plus, I think it is.
Okay.
So yeah, so it looks like that's where that'll be, and I get that already, so I'll be able to watch that
when and if it comes out. So.
But yeah.
I'm sorry. We got the little hand communications going on. Now I'm a little bit lost. So. I couldn't tell if it was directed at me or not, so okay.
Right.
Right. Okay. You want to grade this one, or are we done talking about it, or?
I'll say I'll go fine on it. Just super. I mean, I like the beginning of the story for sure. Where it's just crime reporter and stuff like that. I could kind of take or leave the supernatural aspects of it, I think, but. Overall, I really liked it. I'll probably check out the show, see what they do with it too when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same ballpark. I was thinking like a fine plus. It's kind of like we talk about these, and it's like I remember saying some of the vigilante issues were fine plus or very fine minus, and I definitely think that this is probably a little bit better than that. But I guess having compared it to Velvet now, which I think. Most of us put around the near mint range. Yeah. I feel like this needs to be backed off from that. So maybe fine plus or very fine minus for this story. It's definitely worth reading. And I think that anything that I grade as a fine or better is probably something that somebody would enjoy, or at least, yeah.
That's a good point.
I would still recommend people read this.
Especially if you're looking for something non-superhero, something a little different.
Especially if you want to be in on the ground floor. So when the show starts, you could be like, that's not how the book is. That guy to everybody.
Be that guy.
Be that kind of fan.
I'll go with a full-blown, very fine. I really like it. I like the premise. I mean, the supernatural stuff is not necessary, but it doesn't really throw me off either. I just like the idea that she's tough as nails reporter in a white man's world, and she's making her own path.
Right. So if that's all we've got to say about Abbott, we're gonna switch over to talk about more traditional kind of comic book. And as we've been doing, we've been talking about different storylines for characters on their anniversary. And so this year will also be the 80th anniversary of Aquaman from DC. So we are all going to talk about some Aquaman stories we've picked out from his 80-year-long run now. And Mike, did you want to start us off with that?
I'd love to, Dan. And I apologize. I was thinking it was 75 years, but my exquisite math skills I learned in the school district I was raised in just showing through. For some reason, that's when I was flashing hand signals. It was 75, but now I'm like, wait, do the math. 1941 was 80 already. So Aquaman is one of those characters you don't expect to have gone all the way back to the Golden Age, but he did. He first showed up in More Fun Comics in issue number 73 in 1941, created by Mort Weisinger and Paul Norris, and he was in that title for a lot of years until it went to Funny Animal, and then he switched over to Adventure Comics. So he became one of the few DC superheroes that appeared continuously throughout the 50s all the way into the Silver Age, even though he never had a cover until Showcase like 30 or 33 or 30 or 31, something like that.
So weird too.
Yeah, one of 5 characters, right?
Well, yeah, I think it was the main
3.
4: Batman, Robin.
Okay, I don't count Robin.
Okay, and then you had
Green Arrow and
then
Aquaman.
Yeah, because they were part of anthology titles all through those years in the 50s. So finally, in Showcase 30 or 31, he shows up as on his first cover appearance, and it wasn't like a new character. They just treated him as let's see if this guy can float on his own. And well, that was a really unintended pun, but I like that.
And a really bad one.
Bad one, yeah. I did not mean. Yeah. So he
with fish float, that's bad.
He's in Adventure Comics, then he goes on to his own title. It lasts for all the way from 62 until the late 60s, and then or maybe the early 70s, and it's put on hiatus. It jumps back into Adventure, and he flips back and forth between World's Finest and Action and stuff like that. Finally, though, in 1977, they picked up the original Aquaman series with issue 62. And I'm sorry, it was issue 57, and it only lasted 7 issues though before it was canceled again. So the reason I'm talking about leading up to this point here is because the story I picked was one that just kind of resonated in my mind from when I was a kid. Was the issue where his son Arthur Curry Jr. died, and this cover is just emblazoned in my mind where he's Aquaman is standing over his son's grave, and Mara is just giving him all kinds of heck over it, and in my mind that's the issue where Aqua Baby, as he was called, died. As I go pull out my issues, I realize that that's not the case. He actually died way back, or several issues previous, in Adventure Comics, like 452, I think, and at the hands of Black Manta. So anyway, so what I decided to do was, I'll just read the issues there's 6 issues between that 452 of Adventure Comics all the way up to the comic I originally wanted to cover. And so on to the story here. The name of the story is The Walls Came Tumbling Down. It's written by one of our favorites, Paul Kupperberg, believe it or not. He must have been might have been one of his earlier works, because it was in 1977, and it was great art by the late Don Newton. Newton had picked up the penciling chores from Jim Aparo a couple issues prior, and this issue is actually the culmination of sort of the emotional journey taken by Aquaman and Mera after Arthur Jr. was killed back in 452 of Adventure Comics. Aquaman was dealing with the loss by just fighting all these different villains. Mera, she dealt with it by going back to her home dimension to retrieve a device that she and Volko believed would save her child. Now, when I read the backup stories that covered that Mera story, I was confused because when Aquaman or Aquababy died, it was clear in the story that he died. But in the Mera stories, he had just barely survived, and they were trying to find a device that would revive him. Well, apparently, Volko says, "Hey, go back to your original or your home dimension. They've got this purple healing ray type device that will hopefully save Arthur Jr." Anyway, issues 57 through 61, they have this revolving cast of Aquaman's very limited rogues gallery. We've talked about this before. You've got Black Manta, who, by the way, in issue 452 of Adventure Comics was the first time he was revealed to actually be a black guy. And even though he'd been around since Aquaman number 35 back in 1967. We also had the Fisherman, the Scavenger, and even Cobra shows up in a story where Batman teams up with Aquaman. And then finally in 62, we're introduced to the latest addition to his rogues gallery, and very short-lived at that. His name is Seaquake. Pretty lame, but it turns out that Seaquake is just a robot that was built by Aquaman's brother Orm, Oceanmaster. And anyway, he's the villain of the story. So after all of these distracting adventures, Aquaman returns back to Atlantis for Arthur Jr.'s funeral. And Mera's blaming him for their kid's death, just like the scene on the cover. It's Mera holds him accountable for the boy's death, accusing him of putting his life as an adventurer over his duties as a father, and on and on. Aquaman finally, because Mera's about ready to go postal on Aquaman, he telepathically summons his buddy Octopus Topo to restrain Mera, and then Volko actually asks Aquaman to leave the funeral because you're just causing too many problems being here, buddy. So he leaves, and then he meets up with Aqualad, who had been long absent from Atlantis. And shortly later, Aquaman and Topo are attacked by a small army of robots, and Topo makes short work of the robots, and Aquaman uses his eels to get into this to a ship, which is where this new enemy known as Seaquake is using a sonic disruptor and kind of living up to his name. Long story short, Seaquake turns out to be a robot built by Oceanmaster, and he's defeated by Aquaman. So it's sort of anticlimactic in a way, because I was thinking at least, that this is the story where their son died, but he really died way back in Adventure Comics 452, and even then only seemingly, because it was in the backup stories of the Aquaman series, in the Mera backup stories, where Mera goes and gets this device from the Aqua dimension, and she brings it back to save the baby, and Volko's like, sorry, he already died. I'm like, man, this is depressing stuff. But anyway, that is it stuck in my mind, because I just remember thinking, you don't often see the death of a child in a comic book, and I was probably 11 or 12 years old at the time, and it really struck me. So it's lasted all the way up until today as being an important Aquaman story to me. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, fellas.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one Aquaman story that comes up when people talk about, all the Aquaman stories. I feel like you got, for other characters like Batman and Superman, and even Wonder Woman, you have different things that people bring up, but this seems to be the one that, you sort of hear of, like, good Aquaman stories, that kind of come up. Yeah, if you are playing along at home, some of what Mike is talking about is available on DC Universe Infinite, but not everything for some reason. So yeah, this was one I've been wanting to read too, and just trying to find it, where I can read it online or that kind of thing. But
yeah, you would think they would at least have that short, because there was a 7-year gap between the end of his original Silver Age run and its revival in '77. So you would think if there's only 7 years then, or 7 issues in that late '70s run in 1977, lots of sevens there. You would think they could collect all of that, plus maybe a few of the adventure comic stories. That would be a good collection.
Yeah. Well, it has been collected recently too. We talked about this on a previous episode a while back, where there is a collection of this now out. So if you want to get that. So the story I'm going to talk about is called American Title, and this is from Aquaman Volume 5, maybe? This was the one of the post-crisis series, and this was the after the Peter David series. So this started off with Rick Veitch, and what I'm looking at is issues 15 through 20. And so this is Will Pfeiffer, Patrick Gleason, and Christian Alamy doing this. And so this was sort of not necessarily a reboot, but this is after Hook Hand Aquaman. This is where he has the water hand. And so this is sort of the start of the sort of Sub Diego sort of era there with Aquaman. So this story starts out where San Diego has sunk to the bottom of the ocean. It's just sort of it kind of happens off page, but we kind of just deal with the aftermath of it here, where most of the city is underwater now, and all these people have died, and Aquaman is kind of swimming, trying to see what's going on. There are no survivors. There's all these memorials and things. One fun thing is that this is during the time when Pete Ross, Superman's friend, is the president, because he was vice president for Lex Luthor, who was president for a while in the DC universe, and after he left office, I guess, Pete became president for a short while in the DC universe. So it's during one of these conferences, a boy comes up out of the water and dies on land. So it's a thing of, they realize this, they do an autopsy and realize this boy has gills now and can survive underwater, but not on land. So Aquaman investigates. They find a young girl who comes up to, young woman, I guess, named Lorena. And she's in the similar kind of situation where she can survive underwater, but this time they're able to save her, and Aquaman takes her to the JLA watchtower, where Martian Manhunter kind of probes her mind to see what's going on, and they realize she was there when San Diego sunk, and that there are all these people living underwater now. And so now we have a group of people who are sort of stuck in the wreckage undersea, who have developed gills and can now live underwater like Aquaman, but they can't survive on land anymore like they used to. So Aquaman investigates. There's all these sort of rescue efforts and relief efforts going on, and they realize they have to tell people, you can't come to the surface. They're able to free these people that are stuck, but they're like, you can't swim to the top. To the point where there are some kids who take off and just decide they're going to, and Aquaman calls like a school of sharks to kind of circle over them to keep them underwater, because they know as soon as they go above the water, they'll die. There's kind of a fun scene, too, where there's a bunch of dogs trying to swim out, and people are on shore throwing the dogs back into water, and throwing meat in the water so the dogs will stay underwater and stuff like that. Because, again, the dogs naturally want to get out of the water. But, again, they've developed the same way that the rest of the humans have. Eventually, they find this sort of giant underground machine that's under the water with them, and inside it's this sort of mass of eyeballs and flesh and mechanical parts, and this really sort of Lovecraftian-looking device that has apparently is what's responsible for all this. And Aquaman investigates, tracks down the scientist, who it turns out he sort of coordinated all this. and his goal is to save humanity basically by allowing people to return to the oceans and live under there as sort of the environment sort of collapses. And he, this is a character who sees, his name here is Geist, and he sees himself as the hero of the story, and that yes, there have been casualties, but he will save humanity. It's kind of, what his point is. Again, it's sort of a Ra's al Ghul sort of take on the villain here. But Aquaman realizes, hey, you couldn't have done this on your own. Who's really behind this? It's some shadowy organization, that's pulling the strings. He doesn't really know who they are, but they sort of funded him and provided him with the means to do this. Aquaman pulls a tracer out of him that this group installed in Geist so they can kind of track him, and they realize that Geist will never be able to get away from this group, so they fake his death in view of a spy satellite that the organization has, so that they will believe he's dead. And meanwhile, Aquaman tells him, now you're down here helping people. So he gives him a scuba tank and a mask and says, you can survive down here. Here's plenty of air for you. Figure it out. Help these people. So again, sort of a taste of his own medicine as far as that goes. But yeah, just a really good story. And so they start calling San Diego Sub Diego. And towards the end of the story, there is sort of a shot of the San Diego Convention Center, which the San Diego
I remember that
is held in every year. So it's kind of fun seeing that in there. But this was sort of the status quo in Aquaman for a while, where he was helping out the people of Sub Diego. And I want to say that went on for a while. I'm trying to think, what was the Kurt Busiek run like shortly after this, where it was like Sword of Atlantis or something like that?
That was all before. That was in.
Oh, was it?
That was toward the end of that, Harpoon Hand Aquaman series.
Oh man, I've got that totally mixed up then, I guess.
I'm pretty sure, because I think there's a big gap between this series came out in the late early 2000, early to mid 2000s, and
I think it's like 2002.
Yeah, so I think it ended in 2006 and then didn't come back until the Jeff Johns New 52 run.
Yeah,
I did not like the Kurt Busiek Sword of Aquaman at all.
Yeah, I think I got the first issue of that, and then that was about it for me with that. But yeah, this was I read this run for quite a while, and again, good Patrick Gleason artwork here throughout. I'm trying to think. I know he worked on something before this, but I think this is where I really started to like his work.
Oh, me too. This is the first time I ever really recognized him and thought I really liked his stuff. I think Alan Davis did the covers for this whole Sub Diego.
Yeah, Alan Davis is on covers here.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gleason doing some really nice stuff with the water effects and different things. And again, it's like you got to make this underwater world look interesting, and I think he does a pretty good job of it throughout. And, it's fun just seeing, there's scenes too where now the people are trying to adapt to living underwater, and, they can't see well enough, so some fish come up and kind of light the area they're working in and stuff like that. It's people kind of figuring out how to live with these undersea creatures now and stuff like that. So again, and more, probably more of a Silver Age kind of thing, but still kind of fun and something you would probably try to figure out, if you were in that situation. So, but yeah, just a fun story and a good start to the sort of, run on Aquaman here.
Good pick.
So, Scott, did you want to tell us about your Aquaman story?
Sure. So I was going through thinking about my collection of Aquaman books, and I realized that I have a sum total of 2 Aquaman books in my entire collection. One of them being the first issue from the New 52 run, and then the other being the first issue of Rebirth. I think that's just about it. So I was initially kind of struggling to come up with a story that I wanted to talk about. Then I remembered, oh yeah, the New 52 Aquaman run is actually really, really good, at least at the start of it. And it may even be, it's definitely probably one of the top 5 books that came out in New 52. But and I really feel like it's Jeff Johns trying to redeem Aquaman from the Super Friends cartoon. Because of course you have Jeff Johns as a writer, Yvonne Reyes as penciler, Joe Prado as the inker. And it's after a brief introduction to the first issue to the trench, you have Aquaman kind of showing up, here to stop a crime, which is like some bank robbers, and it's like they see Aquaman standing in front of they steal a bank truck, and they see Aquaman standing there on the road. It's like, just run him down. What's he gonna do? And Aquaman actually has a pretty substantial power set. There's not a person, that in the modern world that probably wouldn't take that power set if they were presented to them. But we're so used to, Aquaman being the superhero that gets mocked in, pop culture because of the TV series. Oh, he can't be away from water for more than an hour, or he has to, he can only, ride around on a seahorse or whatever. And that's back from the Super Friends.
Or his best friend is an octopus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but he's got super strength. He's not bulletproof, but he's pretty doggone close to being bulletproof. He can't fly, but he can, leap pretty well. So, he's definitely not a lightweight, and to be, one of the bigger members of the Justice League, that kind of goes. So it's really Jeff Johns in this first issue just kind of deals with all of those tropes, for lack of a better way. It's like people just constantly are asking him, like, "Oh, do you need a glass of water?" He goes into a seafood restaurant, and people are shocked when he orders fish and chips. Well, what else is he going to be eating underwater? It's not like these people they're not his friends per se. So yeah, they're shocked that he even orders something. So it's such a solid story, and I'd intended to just read the first issue, but after reading the first issue, it's like, you know what? I just kept reading and ended up going through the entire first trade fairly quickly, because it's such solid storytelling. He's probably has wealth that rivals, Bruce Wayne's, because he knows where all the sunken ships are. He knows where all the treasure is. It's like whenever he pays for his ship, fish and chips, he gives this lady a couple of coins and says, put your kid through college. Yeah. A lot of what we saw in the Aquaman movie was taken directly from this, which makes it even more disappointing how poor that movie was when we see how good this story from Johns is. But the whole thing about him living on the coast and in a lighthouse and the trench and so much comes from out of this Jeff Johns story. And then I guess the other big thing is in this story arc is the introduction of the trench, which is basically I took it to be an offshoot of Atlanteans that just took a different evolutionary path than what the rest of Atlantis did. But again, the primary focus, I think, of this was just Johns trying to remove that stigma of this character, and he did a really, really effective job. Because anybody could see with his power set that, hey, this is not some lightweight, and he explains things like he's not friends with the fish. They don't have enough mental capacity to do that. So he can, be empathic with with sea life. And of course, the trench, when they are introduced, are pretty violent and a little bit gory. So, but it's just, again, one of the more solid stories that came out of New 52. If you like Aquaman, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better story than what you get here in the New 52 run of Aquaman.
Yeah, I want to comment. I think what really, other than the less than stellar acting skills of Jason Momoa, I mean, he's an actor that has his there's certain roles he'll do well in, and certain roles He just should know his limitations. But I think the biggest issue with the movie is they tried to combine the long-haired harpoon Peter David Aquaman with the Jeff Johns themes and ideas in the New 52, where I thought I liked both runs. I like that. That's one of the few 90s titles I really enjoyed was that Peter David run. But I don't know that they really are two great tastes that taste great together, really. You know, I think they should have stuck with one or the other. And I tend to agree with you. I think The Trench was a great story concept. And I remember reading, I didn't get, I think it jumped a shark for me whenever, that's like another pun. Man, keep coming. It jumped a shark for me whenever they brought in the others, because I was like, all right, they're going to try to get me to buy another title, and I'm not going to buy this Aquaman and the Others title that's a tack on to the Aquaman story. So I didn't buy either of them. So I quit after issue 10.
I was the same way. I think I was at least reading it, and I didn't want to read two Aquaman books. I wanted one Aquaman book. So.
Well, I can get that. I did go back and buy Aquaman and the Others, and it's a decent story. I can understand that thought process, though. But I feel like you really should read this run of Aquaman at least through the Throne of Atlantis storyline that crosses over with Justice League, and that they turned into that animated movie, because that's a good story too in there. Yeah.
That's probably on DC Universe Infinite, right?
Yeah, that is. I know what that story is. So yeah, and I'm pretty. Yeah, I know this. New 52 story too that that Scott's talking about here is that's on there too. So.
That might be a topic that we need to talk about. Is like, okay, as bad as or as maligned as New 52, what was the good stuff in New 52? Because there is some good stuff there.
Yeah, so. Scott Snyder's Batman run is good in there.
My favorite book out of New 52 was Demon Knights.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at least the first 2 volumes of it. It is just like, if you ever played any Dungeons and Dragons, it's like reading a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. It is, and with DC characters. So it's the third trade, not quite as good, still decent, but the first 2, man, are just really, really good. I think so anyway. So
I have to do some research because nothing jumps out of me. This probably is one that I enjoyed, at least for the time that I read it, but I think that'd be a good topic for a future episode.
The best and worst of New 52.
Yeah.
Mostly the worst.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we have for Aquaman.
So happy 80th Aquaman.
That's right. Can't wait for the sequel, Aquaman 2.
It can't be worse, can it?
Well, we talked about Velvet a while back, as we keep bringing up here on this episode. Again, I brought that up because I was like, well, the James Bond movie keeps getting pushed back, and I really wanting something to scratch that itch, so we looked at Velvet. So now I thought we would look at a James Bond book, and this is the Black Box miniseries from Dynamite that came out a while back. So this was written by Benjamin Percy with art by Rafa Lobosto and colors by Chris O'Halloran. And overall, I feel like the Dynamite James Bond stuff is pretty good. There's some hit or miss in there, but I feel like this miniseries they did was a hit. I really like this storyline. We have Bond kind of going up against a Japanese industrialist who has sort of hacked all the countries' like sort of databases and has like sort of everybody's dirty secrets on this hard drive. And there's also another assassin kind of going after this too that kind of runs afoul of James Bond here in the beginning, and then who becomes a love interest over the course of the story. So there's a lot of variety with some of the different James Bond books Dynamite has done. This one follows the formula of the movies pretty closely. It has a lot of those same story beats. We get the sort of physically imposing, sort of mutilated henchman in here. We get some nice locations throughout. There's a good, sort of intriguing story about, what happens when, everybody's info is out there, all these secrets that the different countries have. And then James Bond mission kind of goes from destroying that to, hey, recover that so we can have everybody's intelligence, so Britain can kind of be the head of the line with that. So that's sort of an interesting thing to see. And, James Bond doesn't get to pick his missions, if it's not a Daniel Craig movie anyway. And so, his sort of mandate does change over the course of the story. Another fun thing in here, too, is because every country is after this now, he sort of comes up against Felix Leiter, which is sort of his American counterpart, who usually when we see in a James Bond story, he's working with James, or he's at least helping him out when he can. This is interesting because they are basically at odds in this story. Felix is trying to recover the black box too here. So I feel like that was kind of a fun sort of take, a twist on their relationship here.
Because he wants the USA to be at the head of the line.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I thought that was sort of a fun thing they threw in here. I like some of the locations. They have sort of Suicide Forest is in here, which is a real thing. It's a real fun phenomenon that happens for whatever reason. And then the bad guy's lair is under the Fukushima Daiichi reactor that sort of melted down a few years ago in real life. So again, sort of a creepy and sort of a, nobody would look for you there kind of hideout. So what'd you guys think of this one?
I liked it.
Yeah.
It's not anywhere near the level of Velvet for storytelling.
No. Yeah.
But to me, it's one of those things. If you're a James Bond fan, this is something that you would really, really get into. If you're not really a big James Bond fan, then it would kind of be sort of it's just another spy story.
Yeah.
But if you like the character James Bond any at all, I think you're gonna have a very positive view of this story. So I had a very positive view of this story. I liked all the characters. And some of the like the crazy ways that people get killed, like the guy who has the sumo wrestler lands on top of him and stuff like that. It's very Bondish, so it definitely feels like a James Bond flick. And like you said, it has all the pacing and the hits for or the beats for a James Bond film, just in a comic book form. So. And it just puts you straight into the action, especially right out of the initial scene where, you've got Bond trying to assassinate somebody and somebody beats him to the punch. So,
Yeah, I really like the art throughout this too. I don't know if I've seen anything from this artist before, but it's really got an Eduardo Rizzo vibe to it. I mean, it's not quite there, but I mean, I feel like that's a similar style here to what we're seeing. It's sort of a grittier style maybe for a Bond story than we usually get.
Mike, what'd you think about it?
I really liked it. It was easy to read, and I mean it was enjoyable. It is sort of by the numbers Bond story, but to me that gadgets and death traps and henchmen and all that are by the numbers Bond, and that's what makes James Bond such a long lasting brand. I did like the art. And if to be honest, Benjamin Pierce, is it
Percy?
Percy. I've read a little bit of his stuff with Green Arrow, but not much of it. But I thought he did a pretty darn good job with this. And when I found out reading the back matter of this trade, they said that Andy Diggle and Warren Ellis each had runs on these Dynamite books. So kind of makes me want to pull them up. But I think it's still a good recommendation, Dan. I wouldn't put it at the top of my pile, but I still would go back to it, or go back to the to the series and reread. So good stuff.
Oh, speaking of Warren Ellis, just real quick to kind of give context to some of this. So as far as timeline goes or whatever, this is after Felix Leiter was attacked in the line of duty and lost his arm and leg. So here he has a prosthetic leg and arm that Bond kind of stole from him during the Warren Ellis run. So if you're questioning why Felix has the sort of cyborg-looking hand, That's what, and again, that's not really addressed here. But if you were, read the Dynamite Bond books, that's where that comes from. And there is a good Felix Leiter miniseries they did too, where again he has that sort of a prosthetic arm and leg in there.
I did not even notice that.
Yeah. So yeah, this is after so in the movies, I'm trying to think. I think it was License to Kill, where he was attacked by the shark, and I think it was slightly different circumstances in the book as how he lost him. But yeah, in the books he lost his arm and leg. But yeah, here he's got the sort of prosthetic arm that you can see in the story. But again, if you're not familiar with that previous Warren Ellis story, you don't really know why Felix has that. But and again, it's not a big thing. I don't think it distracts from the story.
I'm like Scott. I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah, I completely missed that.
Yeah, I might have just picked up on it because I'd read that story and I knew they'd done that. So yeah, you know what? In this one scene at the sumo fight, it looks like it might even just be like a weird glove he's wearing. So yeah, but again, it's not that big a deal. But
you mentioned that there were Bond-worthy scenes in this book, and the one that stands out to me as my favorite is when the femme fatale, I forget her name, she throws her little bracelet bombs into that shark tank and blows it up, and all those sharks they float out into the casino. I thought that was really cool.
Right. One thing that I did think to myself multiple times as I was reading this is like, when did Frank Castle become James Bond?
Yeah.
He definitely has a Frank Castle look.
There is more of that. And again, just speaking of the look of James Bond in here, he does have the scar on his face, which is something from the books that, has never been carried over into the movies. And I mean, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't work for the movies if you've got this spy who has a very telling scar on his face, that might stretch the, legitimacy of Bond there a little bit. But again, it's something I appreciate that they put in here.
I always really likened James Bond to Bruce Wayne, without, just Batman-less Bruce Wayne.
Right.
I'm flipping back through the story, trying to, see like in any of the Felix Leiter scenes where I can see like his hand and leg.
Yeah, there's a part in the sumo fight where he puts his hand on James's shoulder, and then there's a scene on the train too where he's drinking, and you can kind of see his hand there.
Yes, I just assumed that was like a glove or something.
Yeah, he's not pulling a Michael Jackson with just the one glove. That is a prosthetic hand there.
Okay.
But yeah, and again, it's not a big deal. Just something I wanted to point out in case somebody reads it and wasn't sure what that was about. But yeah, there were some, the miniseries Dynamite was doing right around this time were very much in step with the James Bond movies. So if you're just mainly familiar with them, I think, there's some really good stories in here for you.
And the femme fatale's name is Selah Sachs, which is a very appropriate name for a Bond girl. So.
Right. And they do end up together at the end, So
surprise.
Yeah, we all know that ain't gonna last though.
Yeah, that was your typical Bond quick transition from trying to kill him to,
Yeah.
Well, they were together, in the middle as well, So.
Right. And I don't remember her being in the next miniseries though, so apparently it didn't work out.
And it was odd to me that they were like, they actually both work for the British government, which is usually when there's the femme in these movies, she's not a British government agent as well,
right.
So.
Well, I don't think she is anymore at this point. She's just kind of going off killing, assassinating people now. But yeah, that is sort of a neat backstory to her here.
And there wasn't much Moneypenny in this story either.
No, there is a Moneypenny special Dynamite did though, so want more Moneypenny, and she is in some of these series throughout.
Yeah, and this is the more recent version of Moneypenny where she's more like, she's younger, I guess.
Yeah, and more active, not just behind the desk the whole time.
Yep.
Like sort of traditional version. But not quite Velvet.
No. But who knows?
All right.
She's probably, I mean, she has to be the inspiration for Velvet, though.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no question on that. Like, I don't care what they say. You can't tell me that's not a Moneypenny story.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Was there anything else anybody wanted to bring up here on Black Box? Or
if you're a Bond fan, read it for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So,
even if you're a casual Bond fan, I would say read it. Yeah.
If you like Bond at all, this is a good read.
Absolutely.
I think I'd give this a very fine. I think it's a good, solid story. It's not the best Bond thing I've ever read, But,
yeah. I'm gonna give very fine minus. I wonder if I hadn't just read Velvet, if I would have a higher view of this. It's almost like that causes me to realize it's not to the level of Velvet, but it also doesn't. Velvet doesn't have a whole lot of history. It's
right.
Velvet's 3 trades, whereas you have how many years of Bond to come up with something relatively fresh. And I think this is a pretty fresh, a Bond story. So, so I'd be very fine minus.
I'm going to give it a very fine plus as well, even though it's you get that. It's kind of like the downside to writing a story about a character that's been around for decades and trying to keep it fresh. Whereas the writer of Velvet, they had a clean slate to work with. And I know we keep going back and measuring by the Velvet bar here, but I enjoyed this enough and it read easily enough. It wasn't perfect, but I still say very fine, or very fine plus.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's all our takes on James Bond Black Box from Dynamite.
Yep.
Well, do we have anything else anybody want to bring up, or?
No, I guess we'll let you, Dan, make your talk a little bit about what's going on with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, just so everybody knows, this will be my last episode of the Campus Comics cast.
You'll do one more.
We'll see.
Okay.
But this last Saturday was my last day at the store. I'm moving on. I got another position somewhere else. We don't need to get into it here, but if you want to follow me on social media, I'll be posting about it there where I'm going. And if you want to, that's at Detective651 on Twitter and Instagram, and on my TeePublic site. Scott, where can everybody find you?
Well, you kept that pretty brief.
I think that's all. I don't know what else we need to get into with it, really. But yeah.
But don't worry, we'll talk all about you next episode.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. I will say we'll probably have an initial slowdown in the number of episodes that we put out. Mike and I we are for sure at a minimum going to go to 100, right. and then we're going to evaluate from there. Just because we want to be able to say we did 100 episodes of a podcast, if nothing else. But we're going to evaluate from there, and we're gonna talk to people, because it's, for some reason, to me, 3 voices sounds like the right number for this podcast.
Yeah, I agree.
And I just think that, while we've done episodes with 2 and we've done episodes with 5, 2 feels like there's just not enough back and forth, and 5 sometimes there's too much talking over the top of everybody. So we are going to we're going to keep looking into that. So, but you can find me online at burgcomics.com, burgcomics.com, and that site has links to Instagram and Facebook and eBay, where you can find things that I have for sale online.
Yeah, what about you, Mike?
People can find me at the very inventively named Mike Atchison 5 on Twitter.
And again, be sure to stop by Campus Comics at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale, Illinois. Again, they are open every Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5. And if you want to call first, the number is 618-457-6011. And again, you can always find them on Facebook and Twitter.
And if you've enjoyed the podcast, be sure and leave us a 5-star review on your preferred app.
That's right.
Yeah, be sure to subscribe. And, as they're going to be kind of evaluating the podcast, Let them know what you think. You know, input never hurts.
Exactly.
Scott and I wish you the very best, Dan, in your new endeavors. So happy trails.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks.
I would sing the song Happy Trails, but I don't want to lose any listeners.
Yeah, we don't want to have to pay any licensing.
Yeah.
We don't need that. All right.
All right. Well, one last bye, Dan.
All right. Well, if that's it, we'll see you later. Bye.
You guys are both frozen. Well,
Oh,
Dan's
really?
blacked out and you're frozen.
How about now?
Yep.
Am I still frozen?
Yeah.
Huh.
Am I still black? Yep.
You guys are both fine for me. So
Yeah, me too. Okay. Normally I get really good speed out here, but can you hear me okay? Yeah, I can hear just fine.
So we're gonna try to mess up your intro like 3 or 4 times again. You know, you want us to shoot for that?
Right, yeah, could you? I just have this, I have this compulsion to tell you to turn the lights on, Dan, because it's all blacked out. Yeah, good. Still can't see me? No, but like I said, it's, audio's fine. Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. You either flip me over or you moon to me. I don't know. You'll never know. No, I won't. I'm very glad of it, too.
You can download the video later. So
Yeah. Little bonus for you.
there you go. And I think we found our stinger. Since it's audio only.
Yeah, I can do that all day on here. You're making me nervous.
His video's still not showing up for you?
Completely blacked out.
Is mine still frozen, or is it?
Yeah, you're still frozen, too.
Really?
Weird. You want me to jump off and jump back on?
Nah, I mean, because you're fine. So we've always said we have, faces
It's
frozen.
probably recording okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen everything, so yeah, it should be fine. So
Okay.
I'm not seeing any problems. So
All right. So this is 96.
96.
All right. Hang on. You're back. You're back. Right.
Your video should come back up.
Yeah.
Okay, am I moving now?
I can see you, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Are you sure you can see? Yeah. Okay, just checking. All right. Now, what about now? No, yeah. Yeah, I see some. Is that good? Yeah, it's good. Perfect.
One better too.